Back with us today is Lloyd Singleton from Sumter County Extension to talk about water and Florida-friendly landscaping. So Lloyd, you have this big model here. Tell me about water and Florida-friendly landscaping.
All right, well, two of the principles of Florida-friendly landscaping are to protect the waterfront and to prevent stormwater runoff. The model I have here to show today is basically a model of a watershed. And it's proof, once again, that we're all really very connected. A watershed can include a golf course, a subdivision, some agricultural land, an industrial plant, some parking lots, a highway, streams, rivers, ponds. But basically all that water is connected, and one thing that something does to their yard can have an effect on everyone's water. So that's kind of what the principle is that we want to talk about.
So when we're trying to protect our watershed, how do we go about doing that?
Well, the way you fertilize is probably one of the most important things to do correctly.
So I shouldn't go out and just fertilize my yard all the time?
No, you shouldn't. You should definitely follow the University of Florida recommendations for fertilizer for your particular area. And you can find that on our website very easily, depending on the type of plant that you're fertilizing. It's very important to make sure that your fertilizer contains slow-release nutrients. Nutrients that aren't easily dissolved by water are going to release over time, and that's particularly important for the nitrogen and the phosphorus. Phosphorus, in fact, is very readily available in Florida soils, and you may not need to add any in your fertilizer. So that's the second number on a fertilizer bag. You want to make sure that's a really small number. We don't need to add a lot of phosphorus.
So the first one's nitrogen and the second one's phosphorus.
And then the third is potassium, yes. The other thing is, if you can avoid a weed and feed where you're doing something just broadcasting over your entire yard, something to prevent a weed problem, you're actually adding a lot more of a pesticide than you really may need. It's more environmentally friendly for you to target any necessary herbicides to areas that are a particular problem.
So how would you get rid of weeds? If you have a yard that's got weeds in it, what would you do?
Well, again, you'd find the right weed control for that particular weed and then apply it to only that spot where
So you just get a sprayer and just spot spray it or whatever?
Exactly. But the real critical thing is to make sure that you are fertilizing properly and that you're only fertilizing things that need it and when they need it.
So Lloyd, when is the best time to fertilize?
Well, you want to fertilize only when your plants are actively growing so they can actually take that nutrient up and use it. Most of our plants, including our turf grasses, go fairly dormant in the winter months, so you don't want to be putting a lot of fertilizer down then because that could contribute to leaching, which is when the nutrients actually run down through the soil down toward the underground water. You don't need to put nutrients in the water. The nutrients are needed by the plants, so you want to keep the nutrient in the root zone of the plants when it needs it.
And also, I guess if you fertilize it and starts growing and you have a freeze, you're potentially killing off parts of your plant as well.
Exactly. And over-fertilization is a real problem too because you're just creating more growth that's going to create more work for you. Do you really want to mow your yard more often?
I don't think so.
No.
So we get a lot of rain in Florida. I mean, I know we're kind of hitting the dry season, but we get a lot of rain in Florida, like 60 inches, I think, a year. How does rain contribute to water pollution?
Well, overwatering is... I mean, rain can cause more of this leaching, but also runoff too. One of the best principles is to not fertilize before a heavy rain. I think conventional wisdom was, oh, it's gonna rain this afternoon, so I need to get my fertilizer down. But
Exactly.
we actually recommend that you do it on a day that isn't forecast to rain, and then you can water your fertilizer in with a very small amount from your irrigation system. Usually about 1/4 inch is all that's needed. If you do fertilize before a heavy rain, a lot of that nutrient is just going to wash right off onto your driveway and the street in front of you and down into that storm drain, which goes right to our water bodies.
If I don't irrigate my yard correctly, can that cause pollution and runoff too?
It sure can. Overwatering can cause more of that leaching, where the nutrients going down through the soil to the groundwater. It can also create a problem where you're having this excessive growth, which creates more work, but then also more pest problems too from overwatering. So you really do want to watch your irrigation and run it only as much as needed.
Okay. What are some other problems with runoff? What about, we were talking about runoff from pesticides and fertilizer. What about oil? You know, you all see when it rains in Florida in the parking lots, like you could see the slick of oil washing off.
Yeah, that's a real problem. We want to recommend if you do have oil spills or leaks in your driveway that you clean them up by applying some kitty litter, something that will actually absorb the oil, and then you can sweep that up and put it in the trash. If you don't do that, what happens when it rains is it may wash that oil right off again into these nearby water bodies, which directly contributes to pollution. The more pollution in the water, the more the algal blooms, and it just is very harmful to those natural aquatic ecosystems.
And that can lead to fish kills too, right?
It sure can, right. And we all need to drink that water and live off this water, so it's a real treasure.
Right, and especially those of us who have well water too. Anything that we're putting in our yard is potentially going right into our drinking water.
Exactly, and plants are a very, very good filter for water, so the more you can do that actually adds plant material before the water hits the street, the better off you are.
Which captures runoff better, lawns or basic landscaping plants?
Well, both do very well, but turf is actually a very good water filter too. It's fine to use that as long as the water can sink in slowly and not just run off.
Run off down the street.
Right.
What about when we hit the rainy season, you just see all the water pouring off people's roofs? How can we keep that from causing, excess runoff?
Okay, that's a great one. It's very easy to redirect your downspouts, to redirect that stormwater runoff, not to go onto a driveway or a sidewalk or some sort of impermeable surface. You want it to be directed to something permeable, such as the soil. Redirect that to maybe a tree in your yard that likes a little bit of excess water. Or you can even do something and create a swale or a rain garden. And then plant that out with some plants that will take a little bit of wet and a little bit of dry conditions, and then let that be the area in your yard, a low spot, so to speak, that kind of collects the rain and lets it filter in very slowly.
Find an area where it naturally kind of collects and maybe make it collect a little bit more. And
exactly. It may be an area of turf currently that's difficult to mow. Well, maybe that can be created into a little kind of a rain garden look instead.
Neat idea. What if I happen to live on a lake or a stream?
Well, it is very important to create some sort of a buffer zone between, for instance, your yard or any impermeable surface and the water. We recommend a 10-foot planted buffer zone. There's a lot of native aquatic plants that do a very good job of filtering your water, filtering any kind of pesticides or fertilizers before it gets to the water. So a planted buffer zone of about 10 foot is a very good idea if you do live on the waterfront.
So just don't go out there and rip out all the natives to give you a better view?
No, I'd say that there's plenty that are very low growing and beautiful as well. Pickerel weed is one of my favorites. And
nice purple flowers.
Purple flower that's gorgeous and does a great job filtering our water before it gets back to that water body.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Lloyd. You've given us a lot to think of to reduce some of our runoff.
Thank you.